Welcome, and thanks for joining us for another episode of Co-Girls on Air, a podcast exploring all things technology, female leadership, careers, education, and topics within the nonprofit sector. On this episode, we interviewed Carissa Allen, who is a software engineer at Apex Fintech Solutions. Join Makayla and Carissa to hear more of her story.
Hello, Carissa. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Makayla. So happy to be here.
Do you think you could start by just introducing yourself and walking us through your journey from an English degree to becoming a software engineer?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now I'm a mid-level software engineer working at Apex Fintech Solutions. But initially I got my English degree in 2011, and I chose English because I love to read. That's always been a really nice escape, and to this day I feel like you can learn so much empathy from reading and diving into someone else's world. And so I did that. And when I graduated, unfortunately, I didn't really have like a target career in mind. So I ended up in all kinds of different jobs and mostly administrative. One was a social media consultant, which is really just a fancy term for telemarketing. And that was probably the worst job that I had. And eventually I found myself into the paralegal world. I earned my paralegal certificate and I did that for some time. But unfortunately, it at least at the firm that I was at, it wasn't very substantive. So it was a lot of scheduling, copying, sorting medical documents, and I just didn't feel challenged. I felt like this is, once again, a job that you learn in a few months and then every day is rinse and repeat. And some people love that and thrive in that type of routine. But for me, I get bored. And so my dad is a software engineer. And one thing I always remember about him growing up is he was so excited about his work. He was so passionate about talking about the problems he was solving, a little stressed on release day because it was definitely the waterfall style, like big release. But he just always felt so happy by his work. And so finally, I was like, okay, I will give it a try. So I went to Portland State. I said I would try a class and see how it went. And I remember being in my very first computer science class. I had never done any coding prior, except maybe some, HTML and MySpace land, but nothing real. And I remember looking up and seeing all the code and just thinking, I'm never going to understand this. I felt so lost, and it just felt like a totally foreign language. And for some people, like this, this was really clicking for them. And it didn't click for me right away. But I remember someone telling me, just keep going. And, if you're liking any of this, if it's interesting to you, just keep going. And I did. And man, once it did start clicking and you kind of learn the concepts and it just starts rolling for you. It was really exciting. And I ended up in an internship, and Apex Fintech Solutions was one of the companies I interned at. And, I've been there for almost 6 years now.
Wow, that's incredible. So what initially drew you to fintech, or was it just that was the opportunity? And what excites you about working at Apex Fintech Solutions?
Yeah, so initially I was just so grateful to have a job. I felt like I had just learned this coding thing and was shocked that anyone would pay me money to do this. And so I was so happy to be there. I had interned at 3 different companies. And so Apex Fintech Solutions, initially I was excited by the diversity. That it was at the time maybe 300 employees. It was much smaller. Now I think we're at like 1,100. So since 2019, we've grown quite a bit. And so I think initially it was the people and the group and my learning experience there. But fintech actually turned out to be really exciting because we're making investing accessible to everyone. We're powering some really innovative like financial companies and solutions. And it's a fast moving space. There's a lot going on. So there's some challenging problems and there's a lot of different places you can kind of fit in the fintech and in the fintech world. So yeah, Apex Fintech Solutions is actually a really exciting place to be.
That's wonderful. So, how would you say your background in English and paralegal work influences your approach in software engineering?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think from the paralegal side, there's a lot of attention to detail,
Mm.
and um, every little word matters. You're looking at edge cases. You're looking at kind of the case as a whole and how it might break down. And so I think that is a different way of looking at problems, but kind of similar to coding in the sense that you're finding those edge cases. You're
Mhm.
figuring out how it breaks down or what might go wrong. And so the same kind of anticipation in that sense. For English, it's interesting because I often feel like every time I open a pull request, it's a little bit about like writing a paper, and doing the code review is a little bit like editing a paper.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, so it's been fun, but I still get those nerves. When I was doing my English degree, I'd put out that first rough draft and you look over it, you do the best you can, you submit it, you're kind of fingers crossed the teacher's going to like it. And I feel the same way when I open a pull request. I'm like, I did my best to review the code myself, but people inevitably find like silly typos or silly mistakes or kind of a logical argument that doesn't make sense or so they're similar in that way. And again, I think the attention to detail matters a lot in both.
Definitely.
Um, but I think the biggest thing at a higher level is the ability to put stuff out there that isn't perfect and have the resilience to accept feedback and incorporate that into your work and then put it out again for more feedback. I think that anticipation of feedback or failure can be really nerve-wracking. And I
Yeah.
know at times I've gotten myself stuck in that analysis paralysis of, okay, well, I can make this a little bit better. I should just iterate a little bit more before I put it out there. And it's really slowed down my progress. You kind of have to work through that fear of get something out there. Yes, make the rough draft as best you can, look over it, but iterate quickly. And the best way to do that is just to get feedback.
Yeah, definitely. Being brave and putting it out there. I didn't think there'd be so many parallels between English and paralegal work and software engineering. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
So what challenges did you face transitioning into tech and how did you overcome those?
I think for me personally, the biggest challenge has been building my technical confidence.
Mm.
Because this was something I pursued a little bit later in my career, I already had a lot of the soft skills and organizational skills or project management skills. Those types of things I felt really strong at. And then now I'm surrounded by people who, in some cases have been coding since they were a kid. And I didn't learn until late 20s. And um, it, I think it can feel a little bit defeating to see so many people that feel so far ahead of you.
Yeah.
And it can make you feel like you don't belong or you'll never get this or it's just going to take you so long. And I think what I've learned from that is, number one, do your best not to compare yourself. But more importantly, know that you can learn it and that looks different for everyone. Um, and and so I think being able to reflect on your own progress and see how far you've come is really important.
Yeah.
Celebrating those like small wins and just knowing that you belong here. I know there's one story that comes to mind that I heard from someone else, and I felt very similar, which is this woman had learned to ride a bike later in life. And so obviously all her friends, like they already knew how to ride a bike. And so instead of just getting out there and trying to learn in front of everybody, she actually learned to ride a bike in her closed garage because she was so afraid anyone would see her struggle. Like that has been really hard for me. I have such a fear of anyone seeing me struggle because I think I have this fear of looking dumb. But the fact is everyone is struggling, and you
Right.
just don't always see that. You see the product of, the outcome of everything that they've struggled with, and you see the finished product, and you're like, that's incredible, and they're so smart, and this is great. But I think it's really important to show people the kind of how the rough drafts and the how you
Yeah.
got there, and being really open about it being hard along the way, because
Right.
even the people that made it look easy, they asked questions, they didn't have the answers, they also struggled. So
Yeah. Well, and do you have any advice for somebody approaching tech from a non-traditional background, whether that's finding mentors, I guess you said learning and not being afraid of making mistakes, but is there anything else that you can give to somebody who's thinking about making that big of a career shift?
yeah, I would say number one, maybe try your best to hone in on like a target role that sounds interesting to you. This computer science, this industry is so huge. And, whether you want to be a back end engineer, front end engineer, maybe someone in product, or there's just so many jobs available. And I know that when I was starting out, I felt like I had to have everything on my resume, Python, Go, Java, all the languages, all the frameworks, all the things, because it's like that's going to get a recruiter's attention, right? And I thought like the more things that I've touched, maybe the more appealing I will be to an employer. And that is not the case at all. Find, the job description that sounds most interesting to you, and maybe hone in on those specific skills, whether it's that language, really go deep in learning everything you can about that language and framework and a set of tools. Because once you have that and you feel really advanced, you can switch to other languages and tools really easily, as long as you know one really well. And so I think that's really crucial for people that are coming from a non-technical background, because I think it can feel very overwhelming otherwise.
Yeah.
And it sets them up to feel like they need to learn so many different things, when that's not the case. So I would say focus on your target role, and then really leverage your own strengths. Like you've built all these other strengths from other jobs or experiences, and they do apply to tech and to these roles. And so, make use of them, apply them, and yeah.
Yeah, that's really insightful. Thank you. So there's obviously a lot of problem solving in software engineering. What strategies do you use to approach problem solving that work best for you?
Yeah, I think this is a really good question. And everyone should kind of come up with their own framework. But number one for me when I'm trying to solve a problem is just understanding the problem. That is most important. And when if you're a software engineer, regardless of the domain, you really need to start understanding your domain so that you can ask questions. And so asking the right questions about the problem, clarifying, making sure you have, good acceptance criteria for what's expected, and then breaking the problem down. I see so many ways in my own life, just going into my own house. If my entire house is a mess and I need to start cleaning, it's overwhelming to think
Yeah.
I need to do everything top to bottom in a day. But, start with one room, work your way, and by the time you're done, you won't believe how much you accomplished. So definitely breaking things down into smaller chunks that are more manageable. And probably most importantly, collaboration. This is a team sport. So not feeling like you need to be learning on your own, solving the problem on your own. There's so many AI tools. Reach out to people, friends, anybody that can, rubber duck the problem so you can talk, even just talking it through often is so enlightening. So yeah, don't hesitate to reach out to people just to talk through your ideas and your solutions, because I have seen and been the person to fully implement the solution and then have to trash the whole thing because I
Oh.
misunderstood something or the design doesn't make sense or
Mhm.
so don't be afraid to involve people, and people are happy to collaborate with you.
Mm, Thank you. So kind of taking a step back, you had internships at 3 different companies. What were some of the key takeaways from those experiences that you've carried with you into your career?
Yeah, I think those really helped me identify what type of culture I wanted to work in and what type of technologies I wanted to work with. Those 3 internships in particular, they were through something called PSEP. So at Portland State, they have the PSU Cooperative Education Program. I think it's led by this man named Warren Harrison. And really, I can't thank this program and Warren enough for being responsible for me having the career that I have. So it's a fairly competitive program, but it allows you to get some experience in DevOps and software engineering and QA. And I think they've restructured that a bit since I was in it, but I think that was such an awesome opportunity to just get a little bit of insight into what those careers looked like so you can
Yeah.
help figure out site reliability or engineering. Um, but I think the biggest difference for me was each one had such a specific culture.
Mm.
And it kind of brings me back to there is a place for you. So if you feel intimidated or you don't feel comfortable in whatever work environment you're at, find another one because they are all so different. And I've been at internships where I was the only woman and it felt like a bit like a frat house and
Oh.
just a very interesting vibe. Um, and that's great for some people. So just don't be afraid to, find what is right for you, do your research. And if people can get the opportunity to kind of peek into different companies, that's invaluable because you really get a stronger sense of what you enjoy and where you feel like you belong.
Yeah, that's a really interesting approach to think about the different cultures of every company.
Yeah.
So, if you could go back and change one thing from your journey in tech, what would it be if you would change anything from your journey?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think for me, it goes back to the afraid to fail.
Mm.
Um, if I could, I remember it being tough for me to collaborate with others because I worked all through school. And so a lot of times the tutor lounge hours wouldn't fit my work schedule or professor office hours or things like that. And a lot of college students don't want to get together in the evening or on the weekends. Like that's
Yeah.
their fun time. So, that was really probably my biggest struggle in trying to collaborate. But just whether you're following a traditional computer science path or you're learning on your own, finding ways to attend meetups or other students, forming groups, finding your people that you can collaborate with, I think is so important. It will really ground you in this whole experience and help you realize that other people are struggling and working through it together. It's going to be so helpful when you do land your job
Mhm.
because it is so team focused.
Yeah. Um, so I kind of want to shift gears into more your personal life. How would you say becoming a mother has impacted your career in tech, and how do you balance both of those roles?
Yeah, this one has been a tough one for me to grapple with. I started my career in 2020 and had my first baby about weeks later.
Oh.
Um, and so it's really been a journey navigating both motherhood and my career at the same time. And I would say there is no balance. I have, I think before I had children, I had this idea that okay, I'll drop my kids off at daycare and then I'll work my full day and then I pick up my kids. And so I have full focus on work during the day and full focus on kids in the evening and the off times. And that's not how it is at all. Kids get sick all the time. My schedule is constantly interrupted. I'm starting work very stressed because I have a toddler throwing a tantrum, because he doesn't want to get out of his PJs, or I gave him the wrong, breakfast. And it 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 takes so much of your time mentally, emotionally, being a mom, and that does impact um, your ability to excel at work. I know in terms of the time I'm able to invest in my job, as well as sometimes my cognition and memory is not as sharp as it used to be, especially when you're sleep deprived. Just the other day, my kiddo got sick and was up puking all night, and then I just have to come to work the next day and do the best I can. And so I think just knowing if you're a parent and you're working, there is no balance. You're figuring it out
Yeah.
day to day, and some days are going to be way more geared toward your kids, and some days you're going to have more bandwidth to focus in on your work. So just doing
Yeah.
the best you can and taking care of yourself is important.
Yeah, that makes sense. Would you say there are any strategies that you've learned throughout the years that have helped you kind of um, not compartmentalize, but just kind of balance them to the best of your abilities?
Yeah, I think having good boundaries is number one. Um, you know, I I I don't think I think you get so overwhelmed with how many tasks you have when you're a parent and how many things you have to do on top of your regular work, that it can be easy to try to do everything all the time.
Yeah.
And so really trying to put some solid boundaries around, this is my work day and this is my family time. I think that is really important. And I love seeing that modeled by leadership as well.
Yeah.
Um, if we have our leaders who, are not responding on their vacation or in their off hours, that really reinforces the idea that, hey, we come here to work and let's work hard while we're here. And then after that, like, you should focus on your own time or your family time.
Mhm.
But I also think for me, um, taking care of myself has been most important and
Mhm.
most effective in me being the best employee and mom that I can be. So strength training, eating well, getting like prioritizing sleep as best you can. Um, I think sometimes we get focused on, you're a software engineer and a mom, but also there's this other part that needs to be taken care of, and I think we lose sight of prioritizing health and wellness and
Mhm.
all of those things, along with being, a software engineer and a mom.
Yeah. Oh, I agree completely. Do you think the tech industry is becoming more accommodating to the working mother, or what improvements would you like to see in the future?
Yeah, I think I got really lucky in working at Apex Fintech Solutions. I did have paid parental leave, and that gave me, 3 months to be with my baby and to recover. And that was really important. And I don't know what I would have done without that. At the same time, with my first baby, it was really tough to come back at 3 months. I was
Yeah.
not sleeping. He was still waking up, every hour of the night. And um, so I think somehow finding room for people to have a longer recovery time if needed, because it feels impossible to work in a job that's, very mentally challenging,
Yeah.
running on very little sleep. Um, so I think that is really tough. But I do think we're heading in the right direction, and more companies are offering paid parental leave to their employees, for both parents, and
Mhm.
which is also really important because
Yeah.
when, the dad or other partner is home, helping to support the birthing partner, like that is crucial to their recovery and their support and them becoming less sleep deprived. So I think just doing that for all parents is really important.
Mhm. No, that's definitely encouraging. So you kind of touched on being a woman in the software engineering field, but what were some of the unique challenges you faced, and how did you navigate those?
Yeah, it's interesting. So in every environment, I think everyone can recognize they are a little bit different. And
Mhm.
so when you're in an environment and you're kind of the only one, I've noticed for me personally, I tend to shrink myself. I find it more difficult to speak up. I assume that the men in the room are more intelligent or they know more or they have more experience. It becomes harder for me to feel confident in my own voice and my own ideas. And it is, you become uncertain about who is your ally. And,
Mhm.
um, and so it can make you feel really isolated, just being the only woman in a group, and it can feel uncomfortable, approaching a group of men to figure out like who's going to be your study partner, who's going to, how to form a study group with these people, or and a lot of times we have very little in common. So there's not a lot of connective tissue every
Yeah.
time, and which can again contribute to the isolation that a
Mhm.
lot of women feel in this industry. And so I think recognizing how you respond in these groups and working to overcome that, I think is really important, because you can't look at it like you are not, like you don't belong, because
Yeah.
um, that is a disservice to yourself. And so you don't want to self-select out or make yourself small. You kind of have to rise above. And one thing that I do find really hopeful in this industry is that, man, there are so many like allies for women in the workplace and
Mhm.
people who make you feel included. And, I've been in meetings where I was pretty quiet during the meeting, and one of my male counterparts messages me and says like, hey, do you have any questions? Like, do you need space to talk? Or if you don't feel comfortable talking, do you have any questions or ideas that you want me to say on your behalf?
Wow.
And people that reach out and that notice that you might be uncomfortable in a situation and offer to kind of give you a voice through different means, I think is so incredible. And
It
there are
is.
people out there that are doing that and are really trying to lift women up and make sure that everybody is heard. And so I don't want anyone to feel intimidated. Like, yeah, you might look around and you might be the only woman or one of the only, the only few, but also know that there are so many allies out there and people that are really trying to lift you up and making sure that you get credit and that you have a voice. And, I had an idea one time and someone made sure, hey, that was actually Carissa's idea. And just doing all of these things to make sure people feel valued
Mhm.
has been really amazing to be part of.
Oh, that is, I'm sure. Well, thank you so much. Do you have any kind of last closing thoughts or any advice you give to somebody looking to enter the fintech world?
Yeah, I would say, I know I've touched on this a bit, but just knowing that there is a place for everyone. If this
Mhm.
is something that is interesting to you, um, you belong here, and you have so many strengths and skills, and you can learn anything. And just don't be afraid to ask questions and stay curious, and you'll be successful here.
Well, thank you, Carissa. This was incredibly insightful, and we really appreciate you coming on Code Girls on Air today.
Thank you. I'm so proud that you guys do this, and I feel fortunate to be part of it. So thank you for the invite.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Next week on Co-Girls on Air.
It's creativity, it's problem solving. You're working with some of the nicest people you will ever meet, because people get into UX because they have empathy for others. And so you're going to meet like the best people in the UX field. So I think it's great. I love it. It's the best job I've ever had.